Alright guys, welcome back. This was going to be a sit down and talk to the camera type of video, but I just realized I forgot my phone mount to my tripod because I use the same mount for both tripods, so it's sitting on the home tripod at home. So this is going to be another walkthrough type video. Today I'm going to discuss picking out a tent and picking out a cooler for beginners. I'm covering both of these in the same video because they both suffer from the same fault. And that fault is their actual capacity versus what is on the label. Now we'll start with my tent. My tent was a very cheap, very poor tent. I shouldn't say was, is. I bought it on eBay for, I believe, $25 with free shipping. So after shipping, it's probably about an $18 tent since they included the shipping in the price. Now, this claims to be a two-person tent. And I can tell you that unless you are a cuddly couple, you are not going to fit two people comfortably in this tent. As you can see my bedding through the screen, I sleep at a diagonal. Because if you tried to fit two people in here, you're going to end up on top of each other. You're going to end up touching a wall. So your best bet is to cut the number of people in half of what the tent actually says it can hold. Now, like I said, my tent is technically a two-person tent. I'm going to go ahead and say no, this is a one-person tent. If you are a couple with a small child, you are going to want to purchase a four-person tent. If you're three adults, four-person might still be too small. You may have to go bigger. Your best bet is to look at the actual footprint, or if you happen to be in a store where there's one set up, actually take a look at it. Now, on the subject of one-person tents, unless you're a hardcore backpacker and weight is a big issue with what you're carrying, do not get a one-person tent. They are a nylon casket. There is no room for any type of gear if you want to put gear in your tent. There's basically enough room for you to lay down. There's no room to sit up. There's no room to kind of stand up if you want to change your pants or something like that. There's just not a lot of room in them. Another thing with picking out a tent for beginners, make sure that you are not buying a tent where the stakes are required for structural integrity of the tent. I've never been a big fan of that. I don't camp in high winds. I don't camp in extreme weather. So as you can see, there are no stakes anywhere in my tent. I did buy a one-person tent. You can go back. There's some photos on my Facebook page. I believe I also shared a photo in one of my past videos. And that thing is just garbage. It came with one pole, and it requires stakes for the structural integrity. It won't stand up without the stakes. Now, I will go on to say that if you do buy a tent that requires the stakes, you need to buy however many stakes at the store, because the stakes that come with every single tent are pure garbage. That's the problem I ran into with my one-person tent. I got all the stakes driven in. As soon as I crawled into the tent and rolled over, half the stakes pulled out of the ground and the tent collapsed down onto me. So if you are going to buy a tent that requires the stakes, there's a reason they sell tent stakes right next to the tents in the store. You're going to go ahead and read that package, see how many stakes come with the tent, and you're going to want to go ahead and purchase that many more stakes while you're there that are beefier, maybe have some barbs on them to keep them in the ground, etc., etc. You don't want to rely on the stakes that come with the tent themselves. So as a checklist on the tent, so number one, half your number. If you're one person, get a 2-person tent. If you're 2 people, get a 4-person tent. If you're 2 people with a small child, a 4-person tent will probably still work for you. If you're talking 3-4 adults, now you need to up that ante a little bit. Probably go with an 8-person tent if there's 4 adults. Again, double the number. That's double the number of actual people you want to fit in that tent for the number that the tent company advertises on their packaging. So if you're 4 adults, you need an 8-person tent. And then again, the stakes. If you got to use the stakes, you need to buy different stakes than what come with the tent. Because again, the stakes that come with every tent are just hot garbage. Also keep in mind, if you buy a cheaper tent, there is no such thing as a cheap tent that's waterproof. This one here claims to be waterproof. I know firsthand that the only place it's waterproof is the bottom, the black tarp you see right here. Because in a heavy rainstorm, I figured my tent was good to go, and when the rain was done, I opened it up and I had a nice wading pool inside my tent. Luckily enough, all my gear dries pretty quickly, so I was able to hang it up and get everything all dry before I went to bed that night. So that was a plus for me. So what I do if I'm going out and there's any threat of rain, I have a large tarp that I also pack with all my gear that will cover this complete tent. So if rain comes, I throw the tarp over the tent, weigh it down with some rocks, and just wait out the rain. But the tent itself is not waterproof. Don't believe that it's waterproof, because I tell you firsthand, it is not. Real quick too, you can see there's a blue tarp that's underneath my tent. That's called your footprint. You want to get something under there just to keep the moisture from seeping up through the ground into the bottom of the tent, because you do want your tent to be completely dry before you pack it away, or else you are going to run into mold and stink issues. But there's my beginner's guide for purchasing a tent. So we're going to move on to coolers now. And coolers suffer the same problem that tents do. And that is the fact that this cooler here claims to hold 36 cans. Now, could I fit 36 cans into that cooler? Yes, I could. Is there going to be any room for ice once I put 36 cans in there? Absolutely not. You might be able to drop in a handful of cubes, but the whole point of a cooler is to keep your stuff cold. In order to keep your stuff cold, you need to add ice. So, again, when you're picking out a cooler, you want to half that number again. Like, why can't these companies just be honest with what their cooler or their tent is actually comfortably capable of? Now, again, I know firsthand, having used this cooler several times, it can comfortably hold 18 beers, maybe 20, and then, a 7-pound bag of ice or 2 7-pound bags of ice, and, you will also, be able to fit all of that in there. But there is no way that you're going to fit 36 cans and ice into this cooler here. I'll go ahead and open it up. As you see, it's not a giant cooler. That's a tiny little bottle of Maker's Mark, so don't think that's a full liter or anything for size comparison. There's a can, just to kind of help you out at. Another thing with coolers too is you really got to watch their days as far as ice life. You can see this one here keeps the ice for 3 days. Again, not true. Cut that number in half, because I bought ice before I got here last night. It has been less than 24 hours. This was filled to the brim with ice. And you can see the ice still exists, and I'll get through tonight just fine. But there is no way that this ice would be keeping stuff cold after day 3. Now maybe if you loaded it and never opened it for 3 days, it would hold the ice for 3 days. But obviously when you're using a cooler, it does get opened, it does get closed. You do take things out of there. So again, real similar here. Cut those numbers in half. It's going to hold ice for a day and a half, and it's going to hold 18 cans. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up here. I hope that helped you out with a beginner's guide on how to buy your first tent and how to buy your first cooler. We will see you next time for more camping tips. Have a good one.